Dr. Zykstha had worked in the Galactic Medical Station for 47 cycles. She had treated thousands of patients from hundreds of different species. She had seen the fragile Velurians with their glass-like bones. She had healed the mighty Krothax warriors who could survive the vacuum of space for several minutes. She had even once operated on a member of the ancient Siloth race, beings so old that their biology had become a mystery even to themselves. But nothing in all her years of practice had prepared her for humans. The first human she ever treated arrived on a cargo ship that had suffered a catastrophic engine failure near the station. The ship had been torn apart, and most of the crew had died instantly. Only 3 survivors had been pulled from the wreckage, and 2 of them were already dead by the time they reached her operating table. The third was a young human female named Sarah Chen. Zykstha looked down at the broken body on her table and felt something she rarely felt anymore. She felt despair. The human's injuries were catastrophic. Both legs were crushed beyond repair. Her left arm was missing entirely. Her internal organs were failing one by one. The medical scanners showed massive internal bleeding, a punctured lung, and severe damage to her liver and kidneys. By every standard Zykstha knew, this patient should already be dead. "Begin the death rites preparation," Zykstha said to her assistant, a young Velurian named Keth. "There is nothing we can do here. Her injuries are not compatible with life." Keth nodded sadly and began to prepare the ceremonial cloth that would cover the body. It was a tradition in the station to honor the dead of all species according to their own customs when possible. Since they knew little about human death customs, the simple white cloth would have to do. But then something happened that changed everything. The human opened her eyes. Zykstha froze in shock. This was impossible. No being could remain conscious with such injuries. The pain alone should have shut down her neural pathways entirely. Yet the human's eyes were open, and they were looking directly at her. "Don't," the human said. Her voice was weak, barely a whisper, but it was clear. "Don't give up on me." "You should not be able to speak," Zykstha said. "You should not be conscious. Your body has suffered damage that no living creature can survive." The human's lips moved into what Zykstha would later learn was called a smile. "You don't know humans very well, do you?" "I have never treated a human before," Zykstha admitted. "Your species is new to galactic space. We have little data on your biology." "Then let me tell you something about us," Sarah said. Her breathing was labored and blood was leaking from the corner of her mouth, but her eyes remained focused. "We don't give up, ever. Our bodies might be weak compared to yours. We might break easily, but we have something that other species don't seem to have." "What is that?" "The absolute refusal to die." Zykstha stared at the human in confusion. She had heard many dying patients make bold claims before. It was a common response to the approach of death. The mind often rejected the reality of its own ending, but there was something different in this human's eyes, something that made Zykstha pause. "Your vital signs are failing," Zykstha said. "Your heart is struggling to pump blood. Your organs are shutting down. These are facts that cannot be changed by willpower." "Then we'll see who's right," Sarah said. "You or my willpower. Now are you going to help me, or are you going to stand there and watch me prove you wrong?" Something stirred inside Zykstha. She had become a doctor because she wanted to save lives. Over the years, she had learned when a patient could be saved and when they could not. She had learned to accept death as a natural part of existence. But this human was challenging everything she thought she knew. "Keth," Zykstha said slowly, "put away the death cloth. We are going to operate." "Doctor," Keth looked at her in surprise, "but the scanners show." "I know what the scanners show, but the scanners have never encountered a human before. Perhaps they do not know everything." Zykstha began to work. She moved quickly but carefully, using every tool and technique she had learned over her long career. She sealed the punctured lung first, then moved to stop the internal bleeding. The damage was extensive. Every time she fixed one problem, another appeared. The human's body seemed determined to fail in every possible way. But the human herself seemed equally determined not to let it. Throughout the entire operation, Sarah remained conscious. This was extraordinary by itself. Most species would fall into a protective unconsciousness during such trauma. But humans, Zixta was learning, were not most species. "What are you doing now?" Sarah asked at one point, her voice strained with pain. "I am attempting to repair your liver, but the damage is severe. I may need to remove a portion of it." "Do what you have to do. My grandmother had half her liver removed back on Earth. She lived another 30 years after that." Zixta paused. "Your species can survive with only half a liver." "We can survive with a lot less than you'd think." This was fascinating information. Zixta filed it away and continued working. Hour after hour passed. Her arms grew tired. Her concentration began to waver. But every time she felt like giving up, she would look at the human's face and see those determined eyes staring back at her. "You are still conscious," Zixta observed during a brief pause. "How is this possible?" "I'm focusing on staying awake," Sarah said. "If I fall asleep, I'm afraid I won't wake up." "That is not how biology works." "Maybe not for your species, but humans have a long history of dying when we give up and surviving when we don't. Our bodies listen to our minds more than you might think." Zixta did not know what to make of this. It contradicted everything she understood about medicine. The body was a machine, and machines did not respond to willpower. They responded to physical laws. When a part was broken beyond repair, no amount of determination could fix it. Yet this human was still alive. The operation continued through the night cycle and into the morning. Zixta replaced the missing blood with synthetic substitutes. She rebuilt the damaged organs as best she could. She set the broken bones and sealed the countless wounds. It was the most difficult operation of her entire career. And somehow, against all probability, the human survived it. When it was finally over, Zixta stepped back from the table and looked at her patient in wonder. Sarah's eyes were closed now, but her chest was rising and falling in a steady rhythm. The monitors showed stable vital signs. Not strong, but stable. "This should not be possible," Zixta whispered. Keth was staring at the human with wide eyes. "I have never seen anything like this, doctor. How did she survive?" Zixta had no answer. She had worked on countless patients who had suffered far less severe injuries and died despite her best efforts. Yet this fragile human had clung to life through wounds that should have killed her 10 times over. "I do not know," Zixta admitted, "but I intend to find out." The recovery of Sarah Chen became the most talked-about event in the Galactic Medical Station's history. Within days, news of the miraculous human survivor spread to every corner of the station. Medical professionals from dozens of species came to observe her progress, unable to believe that any creature could survive such catastrophic injuries. But Sarah did more than just survive. She improved. On the 3rd day after her operation, she woke up and asked for food. On the 5th day, she sat up in her bed without assistance. On the 7th day, she attempted to stand, even though she had no legs to stand on. "What are you doing?" Zixta demanded when she found Sarah trying to lift herself off the bed. "You cannot stand. Your lower limbs were too damaged to save. They were removed during the operation." Sarah looked down at the empty space where her legs had been. "I know, but I need to move. If I stay in this bed too long, I'll go crazy." "You will fall and injure yourself further." "Then I'll fall, but I won't stay still." This stubbornness was infuriating to Zixta. In her experience, patients who did not follow medical advice often died as a result. The body needed rest to heal. It needed time and careful treatment. Activity and exertion only made things worse. But once again, Sarah proved her wrong. Despite her activity, Sarah's recovery continued at an astonishing pace. Her remaining organs began to function normally again. Her blood production increased to replace what she had lost. Even her mental state remained positive and alert, despite having suffered what should have been deeply traumatic injuries. "I don't understand," Zykstha said one day during a routine examination. "Your body is healing faster than any patient I have ever treated, yet you refuse to rest. You push yourself constantly. By all medical logic, you should be getting worse, not better." Sarah laughed. It was a warm sound that Zykstha found oddly pleasant. "Where I come from, we call it fighting spirit. The more we fight, the stronger we get. Lying around waiting to die isn't in our nature." "But you were dying. You were at the very edge of death." "And that's exactly when humans are most dangerous," Sarah said. "When our backs are against the wall, when everything looks hopeless, that's when we find a strength we didn't know we had. It's been that way for our entire history." Zykstha found herself fascinated by this human. She began to spend more and more time with Sarah, studying her recovery and asking questions about human biology and psychology. Sarah was happy to answer, and Zykstha took careful notes on everything she learned. She learned that humans had evolved on a dangerous planet full of predators and harsh conditions. Unlike many species that developed advanced civilization, humans had not done so because they were physically superior. They had done so because they refused to accept defeat. "We're weak compared to most animals on our planet," Sarah explained. "We don't have claws or fangs or armor. We can't run very fast or swim very well. A single wolf could kill most humans easily, but we learned to think, to plan, to work together. And most importantly, we learned to never give up." "But surely there are times when giving up is the logical choice," Zykstha said. "When the odds are too great, when death is certain." Sarah shook her head. "Maybe for logic, but humans aren't logical creatures. We're emotional, passionate. When someone tells us we can't do something, our first instinct is to prove them wrong, even if it kills us." "That sounds extremely dangerous." "It is, but it's also why we're still around. We've survived ice ages and plagues and wars and famines. Every time something tries to wipe us out, we just get more stubborn." Zykstha thought about this for a long time. It was such a different approach to survival than what she was used to. Most species she knew accepted their limitations and worked within them. They developed technologies and societies that protected them from danger. They avoided risks and sought safety. Humans did the opposite. They sought out danger and challenged it directly. They pushed themselves beyond their limits and somehow found new limits beyond those. It was reckless and irrational and absolutely fascinating. "I would like to study your species further," Zykstha said finally. "With your permission, I would like to document your recovery and share my findings with the galactic medical community." Sarah smiled. "Sure, but only if you do something for me in return." "What is that?" "Help me get out of this bed for real. I need to start training." "Training for what?" "For whatever comes next. I survived the crash. I survived the surgery. Now I need to survive whatever challenges are waiting for me, and I can't do that lying around." Zykstha hesitated. Every instinct told her this was a bad idea. The human needed rest, not exertion. But she had already seen Sarah prove her wrong once. Perhaps it was time to trust this strange species and their stubborn refusal to accept defeat. "Very well," Zykstha said, "but we will do this properly. I will design a recovery program for you. Gentle at first, then more challenging as you improve." Sarah's eyes lit up with something Zykstha would later learn to recognize as excitement. "Now you're talking." And so began the next phase of Zykstha's education in human survival instincts. The rehabilitation of Sarah Chen became a daily event that drew observers from across the station. Medical students, curious scientists, and amazed civilians all gathered to watch the human push herself through exercises that seemed designed to cause more harm than good. "This is madness," a Valurian doctor commented one day as they watched Sarah lift weights with her remaining arm. She will damage her muscles. She will exhaust her healing capacity. I thought the same, Zixta admitted. But watch. Her strength increases every day. Her stamina grows. Her body adapts to each new challenge. How is this possible? Zixta had been studying this question intensively. What she had discovered was remarkable. Human muscles, unlike those of most other species, grew stronger when damaged. When Sarah lifted weights, she was actually creating tiny tears in her muscle tissue. In other species, this would cause permanent harm. But human bodies had evolved to repair this damage with stronger tissue than before. They call it hypertrophy, Zixta explained. Their bodies interpret physical stress as a signal to grow stronger. It is a feedback loop of damage and repair that results in ever-increasing capability. That is extraordinary. It is only the beginning. Their bones work the same way. When subjected to stress, they grow denser and harder. Their cardiovascular system strengthens with use. Even their immune system learns from every illness it encounters. The Valurian doctor was clearly struggling to comprehend this. So their weakness is actually a strength. Exactly. Because they are so fragile, their bodies have developed mechanisms to constantly improve and adapt. A human who survives a challenge becomes better equipped to survive the next one. This principle was demonstrated dramatically 3 weeks into Sarah's recovery. Zixta had designed a course of physical challenges for Sarah to complete. These included basic exercises like lifting and pulling, as well as more complex tasks that tested balance and coordination. Sarah had been progressing steadily through the easier challenges, but one of the final tests seemed impossible. It was a climbing wall designed for species with 4 functional limbs. The wall was 10 meters tall and covered in grips that required both hands and feet to navigate. Sarah, with her missing legs and single arm, should not have been able to complete it. "We can skip this one," Zixta said. "It was not designed for your current condition." Sarah looked up at the wall with an expression Zixta had come to know well. It was the expression she wore when facing something she had been told was impossible. "I want to try it." "You will fall. The safety systems will catch you, but you will not succeed." "Maybe, but I want to try anyway." Against her better judgment, Zixta allowed the attempt. What followed was one of the most incredible displays she had ever witnessed. Sarah approached the wall and grabbed the first grip with her remaining arm. Using pure upper body strength, she pulled herself up to the next grip. Her missing limbs were a severe handicap, but she compensated by using her partial stumps to brace against the wall. The climb was slow and painful. Several times Sarah slipped and nearly fell. The gathered crowd gasped with each close call, but she never gave up. She adjusted her technique, found new ways to balance, and continued upward meter by meter. It took her 45 minutes to complete a climb that a healthy member of most species could finish in 5. When she finally reached the top, she was trembling with exhaustion and covered in sweat. But she was smiling. "Told you," she said when Zixta helped her down. "Never count out a human." The applause that followed was thunderous. Word of Sarah's remarkable recovery spread beyond the station. Medical journals across the galaxy published Zixta's findings about human resilience. Scientists debated the implications. Philosophers wondered what it meant for their understanding of life itself. But for Zixta, the most important lesson came on a quiet evening 2 months after Sarah's surgery. They were sitting in the observation deck, watching the stars drift past the station's windows. Sarah had been fitted with basic prosthetic legs by this point and was learning to walk on them. It was slow progress, but she was making improvement every day. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said. "Of course." "Why did you save me? I mean, really. You could have let me die, it would have been easier." Zixta considered the question carefully. "I have been asking myself the same thing. At first, I believe I saved you because you challenged me. You told me you would prove me wrong, and some part of me wanted to see if you could. And now I believe I saved you because you showed me something I had forgotten. In all my years as a doctor, I had come to accept death as an inevitable ending. When a patient's injuries were too severe, I would pronounce them beyond help and focus on making their passing comfortable. Sarah nodded slowly. That sounds reasonable. But it was wrong, Zykes said firmly. You taught me that life is not a matter of probability and statistics. It is a battle, and some creatures are born fighters. Humans aren't special, Sarah said. We're just stubborn. That stubbornness is exactly what makes you special. Your species refuses to accept limits that other species consider absolute. You treat the impossible as merely difficult, and somehow, through sheer force of will, you make the impossible happen. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars. What happens now? Sarah asked eventually. When I'm fully recovered, I mean, where do I go? That depends on what you want. You have no family on the station, no ship to return to. By galactic law, you are entitled to refugee status and resettlement on any willing planet. Sarah smiled. That's nice of them, but I have a better idea. What is that? I want to stay here, on the station. I want to help you. Zykes was surprised. Help me with what? With teaching others what you taught me, and what I taught you. Sarah gestured at the stars outside the window. There are humans out there all across the galaxy now. Some of them are going to get hurt. Some of them are going to face injuries that alien doctors think are impossible to survive. They need someone who knows better. You want to teach human survival techniques. I want to teach the galaxy that humans don't give up, and that maybe other species can learn to be a little more stubborn too. Zykes felt something warm bloom in her chest. It was hope, she realized. Hope that she could make a real difference. Hope that what she had learned from this remarkable human could help save countless lives across the galaxy. I think that is an excellent idea, she said. And so began a partnership that would change galactic medicine forever. 5 years had passed since Sarah Chen arrived at the Galactic Medical Station more dead than alive. In that time, she and Dr. Zykes had revolutionized medical treatment for not just humans, but dozens of other species as well. Their approach was simple but radical. Instead of accepting the limitations of biology, they challenged them. Instead of calculating when a patient could not be saved, they focused on finding ways to save them anyway. The results were remarkable. The station's survival rate for severe trauma cases increased by 30% in the first year alone. Patients who would have been given up on under the old protocols now had a fighting chance. And perhaps most surprisingly, the improvement was not limited to humans. It turned out that many species had untapped reserves of resilience that traditional medicine had never explored. When doctors stopped accepting death and started fighting it, they found that their patients could often fight alongside them. But the most important test of their methods came on a day that neither Zykes nor Sarah would ever forget. It started with an emergency signal from a transport ship in the outer system. The ship had collided with debris and suffered massive hull damage. When the rescue team finally reached the survivors, they found a nightmare. Over 100 passengers had been injured. Many were critical, and the station's medical facilities were already near capacity from a recent outbreak of stellar fever among the Kelthrix population. We cannot save them all, one of the junior doctors said grimly. We need to begin triage, identify those who can be saved and focus our resources on them. Under the old protocols, this would have been the correct approach. Medicine was about efficiency. Saving 5 patients with moderate injuries was better than losing them while trying to save 1 patient with severe injuries. But Sarah had never accepted this logic. No triage, she said firmly. She had risen to a position of authority in the station's medical hierarchy, and her word carried weight. We treat everyone. That is not possible. We do not have enough staff or equipment. Then we get creative. Dr. Zykstha, how many of our current patients are stable enough to be moved to temporary facilities? Zykstha checked her records. Perhaps 30%, but moving them could cause complications. Move them anyway, and call in everyone. Medical staff, volunteers, anyone with basic training. We're going to need all hands for this. The junior doctor looked horrified. You cannot be serious. This goes against every principle of medical efficiency. Sarah turned to face him directly. Let me tell you something about efficiency. It's a way of accepting defeat before you even start fighting. It's a way of telling yourself that some deaths are acceptable so you don't have to feel bad about them. But I don't accept defeat, and neither should you. Her words had an immediate effect. The staff who had been preparing for triage procedures stopped and waited for new orders. There was a new energy in the room, a sense of possibility that had not been there before. Everyone lives, Sarah said. That's our goal. Maybe we won't achieve it. Maybe some of these people will die despite everything we do, but we're not going to let anyone die because we decided they weren't worth trying to save. Is that clear? It was clear. What followed was the most intense medical operation in the station's history. Every available space was converted into treatment areas. Medical staff worked in shifts of 16 hours or more. Equipment was improvised from whatever materials were available. And through it all, Sarah moved from patient to patient, encouraging them, pushing them, refusing to let them give up. Stay with me, she told a Valurian whose body was shutting down from shock. I know you're tired, I know it hurts, but you need to fight. Your family is waiting for you. Cannot, the Valurian whispered, too weak. There's no such thing as too weak. I was weaker than you when I came here. My legs were gone, my arm was gone, my organs were failing, and I survived. Do you know why? Why? Because I refused to die, and you can refuse too. It's just a choice. The hardest choice you'll ever make, but still just a choice. So choose to live. The Valurian's eyes widened slightly. Something changed in them. The resignation gave way to something else, something fiercer. We'll try, the Valurian said. Don't try, do. Trying gives you an excuse to fail. Doing means you succeed or you don't stop. Sarah moved on to the next patient and the next and the next. She gave each of them the same message. Fight, don't give up, choose to live. And something remarkable happened. Patients who should have died found the strength to hold on. Injuries that should have been fatal somehow became survivable. The staff, inspired by Sarah's example, pushed themselves beyond their limits to save lives that would have been given up on under the old protocols. When it was finally over, they had lost 12 patients out of 117. A tragedy by any measure, but under the old triage protocols, the estimates suggested they would have lost at least 40. How did you do it? Zykstha asked Sarah when they finally had a moment to rest. How did you convince them all to keep fighting? Sarah shook her head. I didn't convince them of anything. I just reminded them of what they already knew, that life is worth fighting for, that giving up is a choice, not an inevitability. Do you really believe that anyone can choose to survive? I believe that everyone has more strength than they think they do. Sometimes they just need someone to show them. That's what you did for me 5 years ago. You didn't give up on me when everyone else would have. And because you didn't give up, I didn't give up either. Zykstha was silent for a long moment. She thought about all the patients she had treated over her long career, all the ones she had saved, and all the ones she had lost. How many of those losses had been truly inevitable? How many had she accepted too easily because she thought she knew the limits of what was possible? I was wrong about so many things, she said finally. When you came to my table that day, I thought I knew everything about medicine. I thought death was something that happened when the body failed, and that nothing could prevent it once the failure was severe enough. And now I know that death is more complicated than that. The body may fail, but the mind can choose to keep fighting. And sometimes, that choice is enough to make the impossible possible. Sarah reached out and took Zixtha's hand. It was a human gesture of comfort that Zixtha had come to appreciate. "That's the most important lesson humans can teach the galaxy," Sarah said. "Not that we're stronger or smarter or better, just that we refuse to quit. And that refusal, that stubbornness, that absolute determination to survive, it can accomplish things that logic says should be impossible." Zixtha squeezed her hand back. "Then we will continue to teach it, together." "Together," Sarah agreed. Outside the station's windows, the stars continued their eternal dance. They had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, countless species evolve and go extinct. They would continue long after everyone in the station was gone. But for now, in this one small corner of the galaxy, a single human and a single alien doctor had proven something that would echo across the stars for generations to come. They had proven that survival was not a matter of strength or probability or medical statistics. It was a matter of will. And when it came to will, humans had more than any species in the galaxy had ever seen. The news spread from the station to the nearest colonies, from the colonies to the homeworlds, from the homeworlds to the farthest reaches of galactic civilization. The story of Sarah Chen and Dr. Zixtha became legend. Medical protocols were rewritten, treatment philosophies were reconsidered, and slowly, gradually, the galaxy began to understand what it meant to have humans among them. They were fragile, they were mortal, they were physically weaker than most species that traveled the stars. But they absolutely, positively, would not die until they were good and ready. And that made all the difference.